This series holds a special place in my heart. That being said, every single time I open the comment section, I feel like that one SpongeBob episode when the fish smells SpongeBob's breath. My primary focus with this video is on the series itself. However, I will touch on many aspects that envelop shows such as Helluva Boss. I also plan on covering Has-Been and the Amazing Digital Circus. However, those shows, especially Has-Been, I believe, have become a very different beast from when they first started off. Helluva Boss is now very representative of internet culture, and this is in more ways than one. The show is mainly about demons in hell running a hitman business on Earth. It's a very promising premise, and I believe this one delivers at times. Shows much like Has Been, which has been corporately tainted, no pun intended, and TADC are marvelous to me, for they started much like anyone in the YouTube landscape. Sure, it had a huge YouTube channel backing them up, but the fact that animation of this caliber can be delivered to the public for free is outstanding to me. I do believe that this type of content deserves to be celebrated. However, like many of these shows have seen firsthand, they tend to fall off, and quickly. Helluva Boss to me is the better one out of them, even if it shares the same creator as Has Been, and the same universe even. Season 1 of the show is met with a lot of quirky and for the most part questionable dialogue from the characters. Even so, it still deserves praise for bringing such good quality animation in every episode. Notice how nobody complains about the animation, huh? What people complain about is often the fandom and the type of humor that the show has. Of course, the main setting being Hell/Earth serves to deliver some very funny lines and situations. One would think that'd be pretty hard to miss. However, most of the time the show is just met with a lot of swearing, and really there's no need for this. I believe the humor is one of the things that could improve, starting off with the characters, especially Moxie. He is the underdog of the group, and although liked by many, having a very strong voice actor, I believe that he is the one with the weakest dialogue of the bunch. And yeah, they most definitely have to cover a specific amount of screen time for the show to work, but there are so many scenes in here that could have just been avoided. Now, Moxie is definitely not the only one. Even though Blitz is an interesting character with an unfolding backstory and likable traits, he is very filled with dialogue that instead of doing his best to deliver a joke or something of substance to the story, he is just filled with and crying and lamenting in the last few episodes of season 2. Even if this can be funny to someone out there, it feels more like them trying to stretch the runtime more than anything else. Millie and Luna, despite having less time on the screen and still conserving that swearing that is very characteristic of what has become known as Vipsy Pop humor, are less insufferable due to them not having as much dialogue, with the exception of one or two episodes on Millie's case, and therefore failing less to deliver a joke. Even Solus has had more screen time than them at this point. Solus is one that is kind of bittersweet for me. I love the idea that they were going forward with him, but there was no need to have him be so present in the show, ultimately. I understand he's very powerful, but the show shouldn't focus on him as much. I feel like they introduced him like a Moxie, a sort of joke character that can have his moments in saving the day and the crew, and being a background character more than anything. But for some reason, he's just in the majority of the show now, and he definitely did not have to be. This is why Luna and Muley are more beloved as characters. Not because they're funnier or better written, they all come from the same person, but because they shut up, letting them breathe. This way they feel special rather than overused and repetitive. They have presence instead of just saying the same words over and over again. For example, look at this song at the end of episode 10 of season 2. It's a great song in the beginning. It feels like it'd be used for the boys or something satirical like that. But then they go and all up, literally, by swearing all over the bridge of the song. This is just ridiculous and sad. They had so much potential with this song, and they had to throw it all out the window. And I think I know why they do this, and we'll talk about it in a bit. Still, there are salvageable humor parts in the show, such as people getting tortured and then being okay with it, or Millie and Moxie having had sex with the same guy. The fact that demons throw a party on Halloween's Eve. This is all really novel and interesting, and takes part in justifying this show's popularity aside from relying on the swearing to make people laugh. There is another strong point regarding the characters, and that is their design. This is a point that I do not share with other people, for even if every form of art should receive constructive criticism, if there is any way to improve, I believe her art style checks everything that I would personally deem as good, or at least presentable. It's not Jujutsu Kaisen, but at times I can be really impressed with the action scenes and even with the backdrops. The design itself of the characters, no matter what people say, is characteristic of the creator, and not only is it recognizable at first glance, but one can also tell the motivations of each character and their positions in hell just by looking at them. One part that I really like is how the humans look once they die. To me, this is very interesting, for they have some semblance or trait that makes them represent the way they got into hell. For example, Lyle Lipton. This guy was an old decrepit millionaire who was in a wheelchair in his last days and died to a piano falling on him. This is all present in his design once he gets into hell, with how his rotund body that still rolls when he moves, much like his wheelchair, and the piano teeth he now has in his mouth. This is an incredible character design work that I can't find someone who would hate it would do so for anything other than views. Musicals are definitely in there to stretch the runtime, and I think they do a pretty good job of them. They're certainly not for everyone, but they can still be funny, and it's impressive that the show has so many of them at this point. I must say, though, every episode starting from the mid season special episode of season 2 has seen a massive upgrade with these. And instead of making me cringe and be somewhat okay with them, they're now actually enjoyable to listen, except for Octavia's one in the last episode. After watching this episode, I can understand why there is such a big divide online about this show in particular. And it's cause even if everyone behind it does an incredible job with the animation and the characters, it still has major flaws. And of course, no show goes without this, not even Breaking Bad or Attack on Titan. But still, the flaws in Helluva Boss are important, not because they make the show unwatchable, but because I believe the majority of people that sees it knows that it can be better. If only they could diminish a lot of unnecessary that expect you to laugh just by hearing it in animation. Just that change would move mountains into bringing more people into the audience. Also, one of my biggest points is that there is an overuse of the characters in the series. And what do I mean by this? The characters such as Fizaroli, Asmodeus, and Stolas, they all suffer from one thing in common. And yes, they are rather important to the story. But the problem that I have is that they appear in way too many consecutive episodes at once. For example, in season 1, we are introduced to many characters, such as Verosica, her hellhound, Vortex, Wally Wackford, the Cherubs, Stella. These are all characters that thrive in the screen time that they have. This is because they're not present every 2 seconds. Instead of that, the show decides to focus on 3 episodes in a row which have solos in most of the runtime. Could you give these characters a break? They may have great design and all, but having the exact same characters being consecutive episodes in a row makes them overstay their welcome and feel like a common occurrence rather than something special. The biggest problem, at least in the public's eyes, isn't any of what I've told you up to this point. And this is why I think, despite all the videos online discussing this series, the creators don't really change or listen to the feedback, aside from making the Goetia make bird sounds more often. This is because a lot of people watch this type of content, and of course they would. Most of it's free on YouTube for anyone to watch. And despite being targeted mainly to adult audiences, meaning that most of the people that watch it should be people of age, I won't say that it's mature or immature people who are cult followers of the series, but if there's a main culprit as to how this story and many others are seen as fishy or unattractive, it's because of these people. The cult followers, the fans. Much like anime was at its time, and how things like Reddit and Discord is to the mainstream. This is because the people that watch it are mostly chuds. Chuds with enough time on the internet to find it on the recommended and watch it while sitting on their phone and eating chip and lie. Mobile games have the same reputation, and this isn't because they're bad mainly. I think they receive this criticism due to who's behind them, who actually consumes the content. This is the main problem with Helluva Boss, and why it doesn't change, despite having millions of followers and enough feedback and resources to do so. This is why the Ghost Freak song being majestic for the first half, and they just throwing it all out the window in order to please the kind of fans that this show has. And this makes sense, you know. It started out like this and got so far because of it. I have evidence to back my claims. If you take more than 5 seconds to go into any, and I mean any, of Helva Boss's comment section, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Not even by looks alone, but by smell. It's just like any anime meme subreddit. You'll definitely go out a worse person than you were when you came in. And I know to have any presence in YouTube or to be in this space at all, you gotta be at least a little chronically online and be like one of those people that doesn't bath or watches animes for 6 hours straight, unemployed, and a useless member to society. I swear these comments are not human. There is no way any of these people would say stuff like this about anyone they know in real life. Not unless they were heavily acoustic or didn't know how to read a room. Not only because they would be stuck inside their room to even know what another person looks like, but because when any normal human being would see them approaching from a distance, they would start running. People like this are the big problem with the show, and why their dialogue usually drifts towards them, because the people that orchestrate the show knows that this is their most loyal fan base, and unless Vipsipop gets cancelled for saying anything remotely close to a racist remark in Twitter 20 years ago, then they will keep on watching and consuming every bit of content that there is until there is nothing left. Case in point that she has two currently airing shows at the moment, and one of them is being run by Amazon Prime Video itself. Even then, I still want to commend the people that are involved in this literal piece of work that is Helluva Boss, and really in the animation landscape in general. These people deserve a raise or whatever they can get while doing animations in YouTube and making them free for anyone to watch. Even if it may represent a very dubious group of individuals, the show itself is quality, and aside from the dialogue and the overuse of some characters, I still believe it deserves most of the praise it can get. I personally appreciate all the work that is being put in, and to be honest, every episode looks better than the last. Also, the fact that they have talented people backing the work, it's still very impressive and commendable. I love what is good about this show, and I love that it's on the internet and that it's free. But the fandom, man, and the forced swearing, it just drags it down, and it could be so much better. Rant is over. Thanks for watching.